A lot of people speculate whether or not God exists or not. I'll tell you one thing that I can guarantee does not exist: financial regulators.
Right. I mean, it's beginning to look a lot like 2008 to us. We were around and reporting back then on the beginning of the global financial crisis, which we believe is still kind of ongoing, where Bear Stearns had two hedge funds that collapsed and set in motion what would later, a few months later, 6 months later, become the global financial crisis when Lehman Brothers also collapsed. You're starting to see that again. The debt crisis has risen again, you might say. Bill Wang of Archegos, his fund collapsed in a spectacular fashion with a massive margin call, up to about $30 billion margin call he received, and it looks like he's really impacted. Not only did CBS, Viacom CBS fall by 27% as all his shares had to be sold off by the counterparty banks, but the banks themselves, like Credit Suisse, have been hit. Credit Suisse warns in pre-market statement of a highly significant hit to its first quarter results after it began exiting positions with a large U.S. hedge fund that defaulted on margin calls.
So do we play this as a tragedy or a comedy? That's always the question. If I go tragic, that would be one way to go down the tragedy path, or I could go down the comedy path. Either one, or there's tragicomedy. There's a big mix of both. If I go down the tragedy path, things could get woolly.
So the first time was tragedy. We covered that in 2008. This time is comedy because it's the second time. So if it happens again in the same exact way, the same exact manner, that happens over and over. The first time our financial system almost collapsed was back in the 90s with long-term capital management. Remember them? That's when the Fed intervened to rescue one single hedge fund. Here we have the same sort of situation. And again, just like 2008, again, remember I said that the financial crisis has risen again, and that is it went through Europe. Because what happened was huge amount of leverage using something called contracts for difference, which are illegal in the US, but are allowed in Europe. So nevertheless, it impacted US markets hugely. Here are the complex bets at the heart of the unprecedented Archegos-linked $30 billion margin call. Losses that triggered the liquidation of positions approaching $30 billion in value bring to light complicated financial instruments used by European investors that effectively are banned in the United States but still have spillover effects domestically. So-called contracts for differences were at the heart of some of the massive wrong-way bets made by Bill Wang's Archegos Capital Management. Max, you know because you used to be an options trader, so CFDs are the kind of derivative instrument that allow traders to place a directional bet on the price of a security without actually buying or selling the underlying instrument. It works much like a futures contract, say an index. The buyer and the seller agree on the price of a transaction sometime in the future at the end date or earlier. If they decide to unwind the position beforehand, only the difference between the actual and the agreed price will be settled. If the price went up, the seller pays the buyer the difference and vice versa. So you're able to do this with putting down very, 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 very little on the actual bet.
There is structurally no difference between a contract for difference play and a roulette wheel. Okay, there's structurally absolutely no difference. When they say directional bet, okay, it's either red or black, and that's part of a roulette wheel. Then you could leverage it almost with an infinite leverage, because remember, money is free because you've got 0% interest rates if you're an insider. And so that would be a number on the roulette wheel, like number 27. And so you're making hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars in the bet. They spin the wheel, and here's the great thing. If it doesn't come up the color that you want it to come out, or it doesn't come up the number that you didn't want it to come up, you get to go to the cashier, and they pay you not only how much you lost back in cash, but they give you 10 times more. And they say, you got to go back to the roulette wheel and try it again because you are systemically important to the global economy. Without recidivist banking terrorists like you over at Credit Suisse and all these other banks, then how will we out in the Hamptons be able to buy this yacht next month? That's systemically important. How would we be able to justify these 0% interest rates that by definition, by provable cause and effect, A plus B equals C is tragic or it's comic? David, I was just looking at some clips of that movie Margin Call. And it's a Hollywood movie based on this exact event having been played out now several times. It's become pantomime. It's such a trope now that every 10 years they go through machinations of this global financial crisis brought on by regulators, brought on by rogue traders that hit a fat finger trade and accidentally triggered a multi-$100 billion margin call, then send in the devil, the villain with a twisty mustache. Oh, I know what we'll do. We'll print $15 trillion. And then some mop-haired, short-haired, white-haired witch like Janet Yellen's trotted out in front of Congress and then Jay Powell appears with his top hat. Hello, I'm Jay Powell. I'm from the 20th century, and I'm here to tell you that this is absolutely normal. It goes on like that again and again and again and again.
Well, let me intervene, Max, because I do believe that it is continuing as a comedy. This time around, it is comedy, it is hilarious. And the reason why it's so much more hilarious this time, the first time was tragedy back in 2008 and 2009. And the reason was because Bitcoin had not yet spread mass around the world. There was no safe haven for ordinary investors, ordinary people to save themselves from this financial system, which was corrupt. This time around, it's comedy. We could laugh, saying to them, have fun staying poor, because we have Bitcoin, and millions of people around the world now have Bitcoin. And, you know, while these people play their crazy games, and the central bank will bail these people out.
Before we continue, help us by smashing that YouTube like button and subscribe now to this channel. This shows the algorithm that you value the information, and it helps us spread this message. Sharing is caring. Please like and subscribe now. Thank you. And now, let's continue.
Back in 2008 and 2009, Credit Suisse got injections from, I think it was the Qatari sovereign wealth fund and the government. So they'll have to be bailed out. Some suckers, taxpayers, inflation, everybody will pay for these suckers in the fiat world. But this time around, we have Bitcoin. And I want to say, like the CFD situation, the MarketWatch article interviews a former SEC regulator, Amy Lynch, who says about them that they are extremely risky, is how she characterized CFDs. It's kind of like being able to go into a naked position, she said, referring to naked bets where investors use derivatives to gain exposure to an investment without owning the underlying asset. So the markets are naked. They've been exposed as having no clothes, essentially.
Right, yeah, former regulator. No active regulator.
No active regulator will say that openly. They won't warn you about this, especially at that sort of level where it's like a major bank like Credit Suisse. They're allowed to get away with these things, and they just get to say, oops, sorry, our bad. We'll save everything. We'll print more money, and it all goes away. But this time I'm saying it's comedy, Max. I am laughing. I'm laughing hard inside. I might not be laughing right now and you can't see it, but I am laughing so hard inside that I could just watch these people like a car crash. Like, it's just like, okay, this is like a clown car crash, right? It's just like cars filled with clowns, overfilled with clowns crashing into each other in that fiat banking system, which is so corrupt.
Right. It's funny. It's also funny when people suggest that Bitcoin's going to be regulated. And you hear that from academics and talking heads on TV all the time. Like, we're going to regulate Bitcoin. As if they regulate any market right now, that they're not just basically... It's pay to play in the regulation field, right? You pay for the laws, you pay for the rules, and you know, we've got over $1 trillion now to pay any regulator we need. It's not going to be regulated. There's no regulation going on now.
Well, there is, and that is, these are legal in Europe. These CFDs are legal in Europe. These people can engage in this. It's illegal in America, but the bankers in America want these illegal things to be illegal, to continue legally in Europe. So that they could destabilize the system any time they want, because every time you see it over and over and over, look at the wealth and income gap across America, it goes up every single time there's a crisis. So it's in their benefit there's no...
We've been saying for many years that America outsources its financial illegality to Europe, particularly the City of London, where they have things like infinite rehypothecation. And that loophole hasn't been closed for the very reason that it needs to remain open to allow for these fraudulent activities.
Again, you know, so you have the system that has recovered. I remember on the front page of all the U.S. mainstream newspapers and magazines, they were like, Lloyd Blankfein and Jamie Dimon are heroes, and they save the system, and they're gods. And Jerome Powell and Janet Yellen and Ben Bernanke save the system. So we'll see what actually saving the system has meant And it's part of that CFDs. It's part of the explosion in leverage that has happened. We know for a fact the actual economy, manufacturing, wealth creation has not increased at all since 2000, right? So what is this all based on? And if you're going to have these hedge funds like Archegos collapse and possibly take down the system, like how fast will it all spiral, right? Because that guy's leverage, of course, collapsed him. He doesn't have to pay any of it. His company doesn't, he'll still be a billionaire. It'll be all these banks, which will eat the cost, but the banks then give it the cost to the regulators, the central bank, the taxpayers, and all that stuff. So in the United States, February FINRA margin debt up $15.1 billion month on month to $813.7 billion, a new record. It's up 69.8% from last March's low. The S&P 500 is up 81% during that period. All good, except it is easy to forget during good times that margin debt cuts both ways. We are witnessing live the dreaded side of margin calls. The collapse of Archegos triggered turmoil on the US markets as the likes of Viacom, which is in many pension funds across America, collapsed by 27% as those trades unwound.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's tough at this juncture to understand if this is supposed to be, or we're supposed to be sad or laughing. You don't really know. It's a psychodrama. All right, a psychodrama it's weirdly funny, but also weirdly tragic at the same time. The people in charge have given an unlimited credit line to the most psychotic, recidivist kleptocrats that human history's ever known, and they're just standing back to see what happens. And predictably, they're destroying the global economy and driving Bitcoin to $500,000 a coin.
It's basically this time around the 2021 financial crisis, and it will go through 2022, 23. It's the Monty Python version of the 2008 crisis. And because we're all going to be laughing, and it's going to seem as ridiculous as and amusing as any Monty Python sketch.
I can hardly wait for the next huge hedge fund to blow up and for Bitcoin to go up to $250,000.
Do in such a situation. Inform yourself and keep your financial education strong. We from the Compact Group offer our loyal subscribers a free educational portal with first-hand monetary, financial, and economic knowledge. Enter our invite-only Insider Club by clicking the link below. You will get access to first-class information far earlier than the rest. We have prepared a special deal for all our members where you can access a giant pool of Robert Kiyosaki's financial wisdom for just $1. To find out more, simply click the link below and join our Insider Club absolutely free. But there is more you can and should do. Build up several streams of income. More and more people realize that they have to take their future in their own hands, but they don't know how and where to start. We from Compact offer our Insider Club members unique opportunities. Strengthen your financial muscle and get the edge. Click the link below. Become part of our free Insider Club. No financial obligations. But there's one important thing you have to know. You have to become active. So do it now. Become active and see you on the other side.